sleeker and easier to follow. All right, well, as a teacher, there's the classic students will be able to, or the SW bot in the education world, but in this session, you'll be able to hopefully do each of these 3 things by the end of the session, starting with the why. As always, why do we care about civic engagement? How do we define it? What is civic health? And then we're going to take a deep dive into some resources that you can use for engaging people around civics. And again, going beyond voting, I think a lot of times we get warned by the continuous election cycles in Virginia. We have an election every year, but it's more than just voting, right? There's so much you can do to be involved beyond the ballot box. So we'll talk all about that. A big part of that will be the personal civic engagement plan, and that's a template that you can use for yourself, but also share with your students, your learners, your children, your constituents, any population that you serve. You could share that with them so that they could develop their own plan. And then we'll share with you all of our great Civics Navigator resources, as well as an approach to actually using these. So you're going to get a ton of links and a ton of things that you can use, but I want you to really focus in on how to best use them and strategies to prioritize that and different applications and different situations. So this is built to be broadly applicable to different folks. And then hopefully you'll come away having started that civic engagement plan for yourself and have a good idea of how to share it with your communities and ultimately increase the civic health of Virginians. All right. And thank you for that introduction in chat. Welcome from Fairfax. Awesome. Yes. And thank you for multitasking. Let's go. That's so civically engaged. Love it. And again, these slides are available through the link, the QR code, and as well as afterwards. All right. Before we dive into it, a brief history of VPAP. So the Virginia Public Access Project started in 1997, so 28 years ago. And it all started with campaign finance data. So David Poole was our founder. He was a reporter for the Roanoke Times, and he wanted to provide greater access for this. So the campaign filing reports used to just be literally in a filing box in the State Board of Elections office. And so in order to have any insight into what was happening with donations to political candidates or committees, you would have to go physically find those papers. And of course, that means it's not timely and not accessible in any way. So his vision was to make that publicly available. That coincides conveniently with the growth of the internet and the equitable access to that. And ever since they got started with putting campaign finance reports online, it emerged to include all sorts of other data related to state and local politics. So we now have election data available on election night. We have all the results and lots you can follow with that. I am giving the super abridged version of this history, by the way. You can go to vpap.org/about-us and get the timeline version. But there's the advent of VA News, which used to be the Whipple report that we acquired, where we're aggregating headlines from around Virginia. And it's really cool because you get to kind of see how things are reported on differently around the state, like the same issues. Then we began to share more about the legislative process and specifically tracking bills and legislators and sort of the interconnected web of all things Virginia politics. And we also produce data visuals. We usually do a couple of those a week, bringing that to life and sort of making it easier to process. And all the way back in 2017, they had started the civics education program in its infancy with just a few trainings around the state on how to use VPAP's resources in the classroom. But that was limited, of course, like most things in 2020, once the pandemic hit, and it wasn't as great a focus or ability to be able to go into schools and do that. It wasn't until 2023 that VPAP decided to create a more fully fledged civics education program. And that was in large part because of a very generous donation from Bill Olson, a longtime VPAP supporter. And we were able to start the program in this past year in 2024. And I was brought on to help develop that and implement, sort of take that from idea to reality. And here we are, trying to help folks navigate civics in Virginia in a really intentional, prioritized way. And the first part of that for us is very much reaching educators, but really reaching anyone who wants to educate folks about civics in Virginia. I hope that you find this sort of a one-stop shop to be able to do that and easily share it with other folks. But we've been around for a long time. Sometimes at these events, especially when kids are involved, I usually like to ask, are you older than VPAP or younger? Because we've definitely taught lots of folks who are way younger than VPAP itself. But we are definitely a trusted source for nonpartisan political information. That's the key word here. While we serve all people and our resources are for the greater good, it's critical that to reiterate that we are nonpartisan, and we take great strides to ensure that all of those data visuals and resources come from a place, a neutral place, that can be a good springboard for conversation, but a conversation that's just grounded in facts and data and not taking sides. We give you the information and you decide what you want to do with that. So awesome. A bit about myself, just in like a visual nutshell. I was a high school social studies teacher for almost a decade. I taught at Brook Point High School in Stafford, Varina High School here in Richmond, and Code RVA Regional High School, which was a public magnet school dedicated to computer science and project-based learning. And that's where I got some of my project management chops and product development chops. And I ended up working in Capital One for a time with data teams and tech teams to develop products there. And then started my own business, The Agile Educator, and then made my way to VPAP in the perfect like intersection of all the things that I'm passionate about and have experience with and skills doing. So this really feels like I am living the dream, not in the joke or sarcastic sort of way, but this is a culmination of a lot of experiences that have led to this point. And I'm thrilled to be a part of the team. I use VPAP's resources in the classroom in teaching government and teaching US history and the redistricting process and gerrymandering and all of that. So it's a pleasure to be able to now help create those resources and further them. But yeah, all right. So getting back to our goals and focusing on that first one of why civic engagement is vital to the health of the Commonwealth. And the first question that might emerge from that is, why Commonwealth? Like, what is that? And so the Virginia State Bar has a great article here from Thomas Moncure. Definitely recommend checking that out if you want to go on a deeper dive about the meaning of the word Commonwealth and the origins all the way back to the Glorious Revolution. But the simple answer for us today is just that George Mason designed it that way. He chose to designate our government as a Commonwealth in our first Constitution, and then went on to write the Declaration of Rights, which then became the basis for the Bill of Rights for our country. And so we are among 4 states that designate themselves as a Commonwealth. In terms of legal ramifications, there aren't really any. But I think it's important to reiterate and reflect on that word Commonwealth and how our Virginia government and our government as a whole in the United States was based upon this idea of people coming together for a common good or a commonwealth. And that, that's our goal together, regardless of political stripe or belief. We're here working together for the common good. And as an educator, it's critical that you look at the founding documents with your students. Not just the US Constitution, but go look at the Virginia Constitution. It's accessible, it's easy, it's something even as adults, I think it's important to reference from time to time. And you can do that from LIS and see the Constitution just verbatim as it is, the original source. We also have a Constitution comparison. So in these slides, you can click on the images and that'll take you to those links. But we have a comparison of the Virginia and US Constitutions, just a quick overview. And then there's also an interactive activity, an interactive notebook that you can work through. And again, like look at the original source and see, how that resonates with you today. So if we think of our founding agreements and that people are the source of power, and that government is created, it's instituted for a common benefit, the question then becomes, well, what does this imply about the people? If the people are the source of power and government exists for the common good, what might this mean for the people? I don't know if anyone wants to chime in or share in chat. Or we can keep it a rhetorical question. So if we're the source of power and we live in this republic, this representative democracy, that means it's up to us to stay informed, right? To stay informed, to stay engaged. And this is a bit of a shameless plug, obviously, but this necessitates an organization like VPAP, where we have this mission to elevate the public understanding of Virginia politics and government by organizing and presenting this information in ways that are easily accessible to everyone and free of partisan bias. And so keeping that in mind, that it's up to us to stay informed and engaged, that's like sort of our first step in going beyond the ballot box, going beyond voting, is to stay informed and engaged throughout the process of governance. It's also worth mentioning the very basic definition of civics. Civics is simply the study of the rights and obligations of citizens in a society. And it's very simplest. Like if we're talking to elementary schoolers, and even I think as adults, we need to be reminded, civics is about community. It's how we work and live together to function as a society, a civil society. And when we think about civic health, it's all about being able to understand what's going on, what the political landscape looks like, so that we're then able to feel informed and empowered to act on the issues that we care about and make sure that we're taking care of each other. It's a really fundamental, just being able to work and live together with kindness, that I think it's good to remember even as adults. All right, I'm going to take a moment just to sort of ground us in a thing that I shared with the Virginia teaching conference earlier this year. And it's a quote from the National Council for the Social Studies, where imagine a world where active and responsible citizens are able to identify and analyze public problems, deliberate with other people about how to define and address issues, to take constructive action together, to reflect on those actions, create and sustain groups, influence institutions, both large and small. They vote, they serve on juries when called, they follow the news and current events, and participate in voluntary groups and efforts. And imagine, again, if everyone took that seriously and viewed that in themselves and their communities to take that problem solution approach, working together, so that we can function and live well together. I think that's a sort of, again, a powerful why to remember. I trust that if you're listening to this webinar, that's probably also already at the forefront of your mind. But in sharing with others, it's definitely a good reminder that we're working towards being able to work together better. All right. So a teaching strategy that is often employed in the classroom is something called Fist to 5. I've seen it used in corporate settings as well, oddly enough. But just getting a quick check on how we're feeling so far by giving me a Fist to 5 response. And this could be in the chat or with your hand. So a 0, a fist is, I have no idea what's going on and I'm confused. Please help. And 5 is, this has been super helpful. I'm with you. Let's keep going. And typically in the corporate settings that I've seen, and also in the classroom, anything below a 3 usually warrants an additional conversation. Like, what do you mean by that? What specific questions do you have? Thank you, Lenora. Yay. And we got folks in the chat too. Awesome. Oh, thank you. Yeah, reactions work as well. And that's something you can use, just a facilitator technique in any setting that you're working with. If you're working with community partners, you want to make sure they're all with you before you just keep charging on with all your ideas and wonderful things. All right. Also, because I just did a good amount of talking, and before the tools, I mean, I've got so much to share. It's a lot. I can't not share it all. It's so cool. So we're going to take like a mental break to do 3 trivia questions, and you can answer these in your mind, or you can answer them in the chat, or you can say it out loud if you'd like. All right, first question. Are there any campaign finance limits in Virginia? So is there any cap on how much money you can donate to state and local candidates in Virginia? Yes, no, campaign what? All right. The answer is no. And that's why VPAP exists. The theory is that if there are no limits and people can just donate as much as they want to their lawmakers, the theory is that if we're paying attention, then we can regulate or self-police that and make sure that no one donor or organization is overwhelmingly influencing our government. That only works if we're paying attention, right? So we want to remind our learners and folks to pay attention and to check out that data. And we're going to show you exactly how to do that and how to pay attention and find out who's donating the most in your area and who's donating the most in the state, and whether or not and to what extent that impacts policy and legislation. But no limits, not in Virginia. So we're one of a handful of states that have no limits. All right, so at what dollar amount do candidates need to disclose, or I say spill the beans is a more colloquial, fun way. At what point do they have to disclose their donors? Who's donated? And this is the point at which you will get listed on VPAP's website if you donate money to a candidate or a political action committee. $100, $1,000, $10,000. All right. Oh, we're going rogue. 250. It's only $100. So at $100, we list who you are, where you're coming from. We also at VPAP list the industry code, so what industry you're donating from. And then there's all sorts of other connected information we can find out, and we share a nice massaged version of the data, so it's really easy to consume. You could go to the Department of Elections and get this information yourself, but it would be incredibly laborious and probably boring to do all the time. But we provide it all in one place, and we provide the history, so you get all 27 years of campaign finance data that we've shared. So anything over $100. All right, last question for trivia. Non-candidate political committees or political action committees must report mega donations or super large donations within 3 business days. How mega are we talking? $1,000, $10,000? $100,000. We actually have a very specific report that we put out via email. If you want to track this yourself, you can sign up for that on our subscribe page. All right. I've got to get back into my wait time. I remember like there's a lag and then there's the Zoom lag, and I know that Bob's getting those emails. It's $10,000. Anything over $10,000, they have to report that large donation within 3 business days. Okay. Well, hopefully you found that a bit fun. If you enjoyed it, we do, as a part of Civics Navigator, we put out these briefs and currents. And in the currents, the longer form email, we don't send out a ton, but we send out occasionally, especially during peak seasons like elections, General Assembly time. We have trivia embedded in that. So be on the lookout if you're interested in more fun facts that maybe you could share with your groups or your students. Alrighty, let's get down to it. So tools and resources for civic engagement beyond voting. I'm going to start with what everyone loves to start with, which is themselves. And when you're trying to reach people, that's what they want to know. What's in it for them? How can you help me? And so if you go to the slides, you can click on this personal civic engagement plan. And I'm going to walk through these steps, but I'll give you like a quick preview of the doc. So it's just this 4-page document called My Personal Civic Engagement Plan. And it starts with a self-assessment. So just to get grounded in where you are already with civic engagement and involvement, kind of think to yourself, where are you on this? Are you voting? Are you following the news regularly, specifically state and local? I know that's harder and harder to find, though, again, through VA News, we do provide that information in our daily email aggregation. Do you know who represents you at all levels of government? Do you know what districts you're a part of? Are you discussing political issues with friends and family? And with that, I feel like we could do a whole series of webinars on just that alone, right? How do you engage with friends and family in this political climate? So maybe we'll do something like that later, but we're just getting started today with the baseline of civic involvement. Have you contacted an elected official? And even that you could get granular, like have you used a pre-filled form that's sent from a bot that probably a legislative aide is clocking, or have you sent a personal note? Have you personally called? Did you show up and visit? Did you show up online and give public testimony? Those are all different levels of contacting an elected official. Attending a hearing, or again, public testimony, a town hall, any of that. Volunteering for civic organizations or cause that you care about. Have you donated to a civic cause or campaign? Maybe you're thinking, well, I don't have the money to donate. You could explore your top donors. So who in your area is influencing political events? And you could get in touch with them if you wanted and begin to build coalitions or alliances. Have you participated in any sort of public action or demonstration? These are all things you could do. And I'm sure there are other and more options that you could think of, but just kind of get a sense of like where you are on that scale. And so that way we can sort of think about what the next steps would be, how to go beyond, how to go beyond voting. All right, I'm gonna return to our slide deck, but this is all the same information that's in the document, just shared in a little more easy to view way. And then our second step is just to identify your civic interest. Think about what issues matter to you most. So from my project management, like agile background, there's this saying of if everything's important, nothing's important. You have to prioritize. You've got to choose which issues are really the most important to you. And so if you need sort of jog your mind about what the options are, there are some topics there. Again, it's not a comprehensive list, but many topics fit within each of those categories. So, maybe within the environment, you're really specifically concerned about conservation efforts in your area. Maybe you live in, the Chesapeake Bay area or the Eastern Shore, or even within education, what levels are you most interested in? Because when we look at all the bills on education, there's a lot. There's K through 12, there's pre-K, there's higher ed, there's more policy-oriented stuff, there's more sort of brass tacks, how things are implemented in schools. So beginning to get clear on what's important to you and how do you define that. Because ultimately you'll have to, when you do want to share this with other people, or if you want to speak to your representatives, you want to be able to understand and use the language of that landscape. So if you're trying to influence education, knowing what the common terms are and how to speak about it in an educated way. And then moving on to goals. Once you have a sense of what interests you most, you can then think about, what specific things would you want to do better? And these can be super simple. It might be, I need to learn or refresh or relearn how state and local government works. Maybe you work with the federal government and you're not as familiar with the General Assembly. So it could be starting there. Maybe the first, if you want to, again, pulling from that project management background, like objectives and key results, maybe the overarching objective is to learn more about civics in Virginia, with the key results being a little more targeted to achieve that learning goal. Or you could think of it in our education world, we often use SMART goals: specific, measurable, actionable, realistic, and time-bound. The more specific you get, the more likely you are to achieve it and have a clear idea of what you're going after. All right. So with that sort of framework in mind, some tools and resources that I know will be helpful for achieving many of the goals that you can imagine related to civics education. I'll start with this, and I think this is like the single most important resource that VPAP provides because it impacts everyone. And that's our All Politics is Local legislator lookup tool. So it's on our homepage. It's if you scroll down, there's a section where you can type in your address. You can also click on this link. There's a bunch of different ways to get there. We also have it in the civics resources. But starting with that, and I'm actually going to show you this because it's critical. You get to see who's on your ballot and where you vote. And you're probably thinking, okay, well, I could just go to the State Board of Elections for that. Like, why would I need to do that on your site? The value of looking up your legislators on vpap.org is that you get this interconnected web of information that relates to your representatives. So you get all the demographic data, their voting history, the bills they've sponsored, the committees they're on. You can look more at the context of your district, and historically, has your district been Republican leaning, Democratic leaning? Why not? You could look at how your district has changed over time with redistricting in the fairly recent past. You can see who has donated to your representatives. And then that opens up a whole nother web of information where you can look at what people and organizations are donating to your representatives. You can look at who the largest donors are in your neighborhood. And then again, comparing that to the state and seeing, how all these things interrelate. So I think there's a huge advantage to going to VPAP for this. And so just so we can see, this is the All Politics is Local tool. I went ahead and just typed in our office address, but I can see the obvious, okay, this is how many days there are until the next primary or election. I can see where I'm supposed to vote. And then I can see my representatives. So we have our federal representatives here. But then we also have our state Senate and our House of Delegates. And I know for a lot of our, especially within education, there's learning that needs to occur around the fact that we have a bicameral legislature at the federal level and at the state level. So often students will confuse, well, my senator is Mark Warner and Tim Kaine. No, you also have a Virginia senator and a Virginia delegate. So this helps them see that immediately, right? And then again, you can click on the details about the district itself, which is just so interesting. You can look at the history of elections in that district, precinct results, the redistricting impacts. You can overlap different maps. You can see the makeup of that district, the partisan lean. So just really interesting stuff. So I know a lot of folks who registered identified as parents. This is something where if you're waiting, anytime when you could be trying to fill time, like you're waiting at a restaurant to be seated, or you're in the car on a long trip and you have access to, the internet, instead of playing Minecraft or instead of scrolling social media, you can fill those blocks of time with just taking a look at something like this. Look at your district. Be like, let's have a conversation about our electoral district. And, what do we notice? What do we wonder? What questions come up? And then that might spawn additional inquiry and exploration. But without a doubt, I'm sure whoever you share this with will have some thoughts and some questions. So engage in that conversation, and you're engaging in it again. You're basing it on just what you see, and not really bringing in the partisan talking points, if you will. Same thing with the legislators themselves. So I can click on Lamont Bagby, and then I can see, okay, here's his office. If I want to go speak with him, now I can see who his legislative assistants are. Those are critical for, on our citizens guide, we have a thing called Get Past the Gatekeepers. Often it's the legislative assistants. You want to form a relationship with them, make sure they know who you are. And that's going to make it a lot easier to stay in touch with your representative. And it also helps if when you want to go sit down with your representative, to know, well, these are the pieces of legislation they've sponsored. So he's got a lot of commendations, which is common. But also some of these close votes. And you could have a conversation about that. Lots of good stuff. You can see the voting analysis. And then if you're like, well, what is a closed vote? We have this helper text on all of these things. So, if you're working with a student who's like, I don't know what an abstention is. Oh, okay. It means they didn't participate in that floor vote. They abstained. And so you could have even just a conversation about the words themselves. Present but not voting and what that means. Changed votes. Their caucus unity. So lots of good stuff you can unpack here with your people or your learners. You can look at the committees specifically. So if you're really interested in education, we can see that he's on that committee. And maybe, what if, let's say your representative is not on the education committee, but you really care about it. I'm going to open this in a new tab and say, okay, well, who is on the education committee? And we see that Senate Health and Education Committee has a nice blend here. So you might want to reach out to another representative, or ask your representative, hey, can you reach out to Ghazal Hashmi and ask her about this, as she's the chair. So you coming to your legislators already clearly being informed will also probably make them take you more seriously, that you've done your research and you care about these issues. And again, you could go through historic sessions. There's so much here. Last thing I'll show you on this web of interconnected information that you get all from the All Politics is Local tool is demographic data. Again, these are just great conversation starters. Having a conversation about, even if we look at, 51% of legislators are born outside of Virginia. To what extent do we think that's important? I don't know. We could have a conversation about it. or even looking at the original sources. And in some localities, you need to be born in the district, and you know, for the state, obviously you don't. But how is that different? Why? Comparing that to federal law, and for certain levels of office, you need to be born here, or you need to live there, have residency for a certain amount of time. You have a whole conversation about that. Obviously, having parity conversations about age and gender and race, level of education. We even share information like stocks and investments. So to what extent your legislators could be impacted by that? Would there be any conflict of interest there? Real estate. We do have a citizen legislature, a part-time citizen legislator. So that means that most of them have jobs outside of being a representative. Again, another really fascinating conversation. And if you want to dive into just this, we have the demographics page on our legislators section of the General Assembly here. And you can click, I like to look at the whole General Assembly and look at something like occupation. And then you can kind of drill down to, okay, well, who are the people in banking? All right, where are my educators? Okay, it's all these purple ones. And that's kind of cool to look across and see the different demographics of the General Assembly. So lots of fodder for conversation, all because we looked at our All Politics is Local and this, just searching our address and seeing what's around us. And then if you're at a higher level, if you're at the high school level, or the higher ed level, or you're an adult, you might want to also begin to look at the political donors near you. And all of these are interactive and clickable as well. So you can see the top donors from that area. If you don't want to go at it from your representative, you can just come over here to money and go to top donors. And you can see, obviously, Dominion Energy and the Clean Virginia influence our politics quite a bit. But you can drill down the information on that, who, what, where, when. Again, you can look at industry. There's something that's important to you if you care about healthcare and you want to know more about where the money goes as it relates to healthcare and legislation. You can dig in further there. And we have this data going all the way back to 1996, 97. So for my educators who are not in government and civics, but want to get students talking about real world data, this is the place to go. This is data in context. And again, comparing across localities, there's so much. All right, let's make our way back over here. That was all stemming from just searching your address. If you're an organization, you could search your organization's address or your school's address if you just want to get folks started on it. Or like I did with I put our office in there.
So what you just presented actually was showing what each candidate basically got from donors and who those donors were.
Yes.
But that's not entirely true, is it? Like for the leadership, for example, Todd Gilbert, doesn't he get a lot of money from donors and then he spreads it out to help candidates because of his role?
Yes, yes. Yes, so there's more digging that you as our civic citizen detective can do. But hopefully VPAP gives you a head start. I see, Kathy, it looks like you're digging more.
Yeah, he has a page both as a candidate and as a donor. So it's like the money in and the money out. So yeah, you can see both of those kind of sides of him.
Yeah, because I ran against him. That's why. And I realized when he had his like 1.3 or $6 million, but I think he actually spent about 39,000 on the campaign and to my 13,000. So that kind of reflects the vote trend out here in Shenandoah County as well. But his money came from all big people and not small donors. And mine was just the opposite. So that kind of information you can get.
Yes, yes. And thank you, Kathy, for making that distinction of candidate versus donor. Yes. So you
And
can view
there's
it from
also
both.
this page kind of, I don't want to take us off target here, but breaks down where the donations come from, if they're donations from out of state, where they come from. Yeah.
Love that. Thank you for sharing those. Yes.
And
We have,
and the other thing too, if I wanted to get this information, couldn't I ask for it to come to me every day in mail or some kind of an update time to know who's making donations during the course of the year?
know that we have anything where you can follow a specific candidate in
Not by
that way.
candidate, it's just who the top donors were or something. I think it's
Yes.
a broad presentation because I get that. That's why I'm just saying it. I still
Yes.
get that today, and who the big donors are.
Yes. Yes. Yes, we have our Virginia politics pulse, if you will. So the money and politics part of the newsletter. Um, if you're interested too in lobbyist registrations, when you go to our subscribe page, you can select those if you're interested to receive them. But yeah, thanks for that call out, Bob. All right. So that is the very first step. So if you're working with learners, constituents, members of your organization, I would start there with the All Politics is Local lookup tool and begin to do some discovery. And I'll give you some inquiry instructional approaches to pair with that in just a moment once we get through our resources. But the next best thing, and I highly encourage you to bookmark this if you haven't already, are our Civics Navigator resources. So this is that program that we launched in September. And if you go there, there is so much that you can see, but it's vpap.org/civics. And once you're there, we have an overview, we have our communications, and then this resources page where you can search by grade level, by topic, and even by format. So if you are looking for an interactive notebook is great. If you're a teacher looking for something you can give a kid that's ready-made and interactive. And so if you need a substitute lesson plan, I think that's great. That could be your backup sub plan if you need it. And it'll tell you, what's involved there, but all of them are entirely self-guided. So there are questions that work you through it. And I've used these, they are tested, like we've been able to have a great success with these interactive notebooks. It's something you could load into Canvas or Schoology or Blackboard or whatever learning management system that your students use, or if you're a home educator, these are great for that as well. Then we also have interactive visuals, just downloadable images. So if you're looking to decorate your classroom walls, you could download and print them out too. That's always nice. And in fact, if you're studying anything related to Virginia General Assembly, then I would absolutely print this out and put it on my wall on how a bill becomes a law in Virginia. And again, explains the politics at play and the process. And so you could have a bill up and kind of work through this, but it doesn't stop there. So the coolest thing that actually Kathy on the call had a huge role in making and set up is our top bills resource of 2025. So we selected 6 issue areas that we felt students would be interested in following this General Assembly session. And rest assured, if you're looking at this afterwards, which we are, that's okay, because there's still a lot of really useful stuff here. With these 6 issues, again, not controversial, but relevant and interesting. So the schools bill is related to having cell phones in the classroom, or rather not having them. There's some bills about children creating content online and whether or not they should be paid. That's relevant to all of our young YouTubers out there. We have a bill about AI and politically AI generated ads, deep fakes. There was an animal welfare bill, a bill about voter registration and elections and high schools, and then a bill about the environment and plastic bags. And so I love too, all of these kind of took a different trajectory, and you can see on our visual tracker just really quickly how they fared throughout the session. You can also see this plain English summary, but if you want to see the original text, you can see that as well. But the beauty is really in the track this bill portion. So we did this live as it was happening during session, and we intend to do so again next session. So pay close attention for then, or if you have any special requests, we're all ears. But during session, we shared the process all the way from drafting and pre-filing, notably with the original text. So again, for our teachers out there, showing primary sources, or the VDOE is calling it information sources, is really important. So you have the original, but you also have the explained version. And then we also see for each of these the floor debates and the discussion that actual legislators had on this issue. And all of these are 2 minutes, 2.5 minutes. They're short video clips, so you don't have to watch through the whole thing or find it. You can just come here and see all of the discussion related to the 3 constitutional readings of this bill, the voting on this bill, and you could go through this as a student or with your classroom, and then see what actually happened, and then simulate that debate yourself, or in your own classroom. Or maybe you flip it, maybe you start and you simulate it, and then you say, okay, well, how did it actually happen? What happened in the General Assembly? But either way, this is grounds for learning the political process in Virginia, the language that's used. Throughout this, it's compared to how the federal government works as well. So you can get a nice compare contrast with the federal government. And then we get all the way to this one made it through the governor's desk and will be enacted. And then you can also look at, again, the original source, the Code of Virginia. All of this good stuff is all in one place for these issues. And if you like following this and you kind of learn the process, you can then go over here to other bills and issues and search other things as well. Or from your personal engagement, civic engagement plan, look at the issues that matter to you from this page as well. So this includes not just the top bills, but all of them. So you can view it that way and examine all of the interconnected things that go with it here. So that is our just great intro to legislation and lawmaking in Virginia. The last thing I would add, just to harken back to the start of our conversation, we have some resources around the Virginia Constitution. That's really great, educators, when we get to Constitution Day and week in September, to pull that up and talk about the US Constitution, but also the Virginia Constitution, and just putting that in a nice, approachable format that's interactive there. All right. And then next up, we have our some additional resources. I know I am running out of time. Oh my gosh, where does the time go? We have our Citizens Guide, and again, I've already alluded to this, so I don't think we have to spend a ton of time there, but you can examine the legislative context of your region and of the state. Subscribing to VA News, that's great for our English educators as you're talking about information sources, disinformation, political opinion, fact versus opinion. You can do lateral reading exercises where you look across the headlines to find the consensus. Lots of skill building that you can do with just our VA News news aggregator. And then election results and visuals. If you're not subscribed, again, our weekly updates include the visuals that come out. We usually have a couple every week that takes something that's relevant and real and happening in Virginia and puts it in a way that's easy to talk about and understand. Alrighty. Since I am rapidly running out of time, I'm gonna kind of skip through these, but the links are here. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention, just again, accessing those original sources, examining your local government, looking at your local town, city charter, and looking at the government agencies that influence the issues you care about. You can do all of that there. Highly recommend sharing and committing to an action plan, a short, medium, and long-term plan, and then an implementation strategy for that. How are you going to know that you've learned or succeeded in your plan, and how are you going to track your progress? How can you make that visual? This might come down to a habit stacking sort of thing. As I mentioned earlier, if you're on social media and you're trying to reduce your time there, you know, every time you open your phone, could you check out VPAP and take that time to substitute that habit? Or maybe it's just some of the time. Maybe every Monday or some day that you choose, you'll choose to open up your civics engagement plan instead of scrolling socials. Alrighty. Lastly, inquiry approaches. So if you're teaching in Virginia and you haven't yet looked at or explored the inquiry design model, highly recommend clicking on that. The essence of it is that we learn best when we take a constructive pedagogical approach, as in we learn by building on what we already know and care about, and we learn by building on our own interest. And that's why I started with find your district, find your representatives, and work from there. And so the inquiry design model starts there with providing voice and choice in the learning, and then gives you some really structured ways to design your learning units around questions. Similarly, the question formulation technique, QFT, something I often use in the classroom. And for our adult learners, this is also great. I love this, this article that was shared actually very recently from the Right Question Institute about the QFT. But QFT is all around asking questions, but beginning to discern what's an open-ended question, what's a closed question, how can I begin to ask more open-ended questions? And there's a lot of power in asking questions just as a form of self-advocacy, right? I love this quote from that article where it says, you know, people need to know that they can ask questions. I think sometimes as members of the public, we think asking questions makes us look dumb or that we don't know, but and that causes us to maybe not ask questions to even our doctors or our landlords, but you have to be inquisitive, right? And so this is a strategy you can use to begin asking more questions. And as you're exploring our resources, we want you to think about, well, what questions you have and how can you find those answers, and asking those open-ended questions. And to tie this all together, there's a Charles Duhigg book called Super Communicators. And I was just reading that, you know, research shows that highly effective communicators tend to ask more questions. So it's all about getting your folks to do that and to have that conversation and hopefully ask an open-ended question, right, where it actually starts a conversation. We could spend all day in this space and kind of expanding out further, but hopefully that gives you a spark to explore inquiry-focused approaches to your work and to your own learning, because that's, you know, also a hallmark of great learning is continuing to go through that learning process. So as you're developing your civic engagement plan, think about how can you ask good questions. Maybe that's a skill you want to hone as a part of your civic action plan. And then how can you utilize those specific VPAP resources we've discussed today? So for our policy folks, that might be informing your advocacy strategies or even your development strategies. For educators, going to vpap.org/civics and taking in, deciding which specific resources you might start with. For parents, same thing. You could start with some of those resources, but again, starting that conversation around state and local government and modeling that it's good and healthy and normal to talk about what's going on in Virginia government and politics. And for our nonprofit leaders, again, maybe, leveraging a tool like this plan with your group or organization to further the civic learning of your organization and so that you're able to better serve the people that you're working with. All right. We are at 8:31. I'm usually good with holding time. So I am going to skip our check. I'm hoping and thinking that this was enormously beneficial. If you do have questions, please feel free to reach out to us. Kathy listed our email in the chat. For general questions, info@vpap.org. If you have a specific question for us, civics@vpap.org works as well. Or I'm Erin Hill, so ehill@vpap.org, whatever you're most comfortable with. But I definitely appreciate you taking time out on a weeknight to learn about civics education and things that you can do to further the civic health of Virginia. So please share these resources widely and often. And if you have any feedback, if there's something we can do better or request, that will help us prioritize civic education things that are most needed. Or if you have any questions, or even from your organization, if there's something you're like, oh, I'm not really sure how that works in the General Assembly, shoot us an email. Or, oh, I don't know about campaign finance, this little thing. I bet they know. Just ask. If you're thinking it, probably someone else is thinking about it. So don't hesitate to ask and email us. Awesome. All righty. Any final burning desires? If there's like one question that we need to answer or final thoughts? Getting lots of love in the chat. I appreciate that. All righty. Next session. Yes. Oh, that's a great segue. Oh, thank you, Bob. All right. So if we go over to our Civics Navigator, our next session will be listed here under the events tab. So vpap.org/civics/events. This one is here. You can see previous ones. I need to add some still. There's so much coming up. The next big one is we'll be attending the Home Educators Conference, but we will very likely be doing a webinar like this again this summer. And I'm spending a lot of time in June and August and July going to school systems, school divisions directly to share these resources. So if you're working for a division and you need some professional learning or professional development things, nothing is too large or small, please reach out to me and we'll get you scheduled in and you can request it. Request a custom session with us if you'd like to, or with your organization. I find a lot of folks are from the policy side. So if there's something we can be of help with, I'd love to start a partnership all about building coalitions to enhance the civics education of Virginia. All righty. Well, thank you so much, everyone. Have a good night. Take care.